I've compiled a list of popular, unpopular bookish opinions or hot takes from all over the internet, and I'm gonna give you my opinion on them. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Fallon. I am 34 years old and I make bookish content right here on YouTube. So like I said at the beginning, I have compiled a list of popular, unpopular bookish opinions or hot takes from like all over the internet. And I'm saying bookish because it's not really like specific to one book, but more like the bookish community at large. And I'm saying popular because these opinions are not as unpopular as people like to think that they are. I looked all over. I went to YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, and I just sort of put together a list that I felt was, I don't know, good enough, I guess. Some of these are more silly and lighthearted. A few of them are a little more serious, but either way, I'm going to be reading them to you and then giving you my opinion on them. Then at the end of this video, I'm gonna give you my unpopular bookish opinions and you guys can react to them in the comments below. Okay, so I have the whole list of all of the opinions right here that I'm gonna read to you and then give you my reaction. The first one is, collecting books because they are pretty and not reading them is silly and wasteful. I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree. Listen, I have a lot of books. I have a lot of books that I have never read. I have a lot of books that I probably may never read, but I like having them. I like being surrounded by books, and the idea of at any point I could go up to my bookshelf and grab a book that I've never read and then read it. Or if somebody comes over, the same thing. They can grab a book and they can read it. I always want to be surrounded by books. Like, you're never gonna see a book unhaul from me. It's never gonna happen, ever. No, I think that collecting books because they're pretty or because they're special edition or whatever the reason may be, it's nothing different than collecting anything, you know? People collect all sorts of things, and if they want to collect books, then let them collect books. I don't know. Also, the idea that it's wasteful, I think that's a little bit subjective. Like, what you spend your money on might be different than what somebody else spends their money on. Like, everybody has different priorities when it comes to what they spend their money on and what they deem important or non-important. I know for me, books is important, not just because I do this, but because I like books. Like, I don't collect anything else. I collect books, and that's what it is. So, okay, next one. How much booktubers and book talkers read sets unrealistic expectations for the average reader. I kind of agree. I do kind of agree. I am not a fast reader. I think the most that I've read in a month is maybe 7 or 8 books. That's a lot for me. An average month is probably more around like 4 or 5 books. That being said, when I first started doing this, you know, making YouTube videos, one of my biggest concerns was like, I don't feel like I read enough to keep up with other people. I sort of had to realize that, like, it's not a competition and it's not a race. I'm not trying to, you know, I don't have to keep up with anybody else. But I will say it is difficult, even before I started this, to like see somebody that like makes bookish content and they're talking about, oh, I read 15 books this month, or I read this many, and I'm like, how? How do you have time for anything else if all you're doing is reading? Even with audiobooks, even if I do an audiobook and I'm reading, it's just, I don't know, I can't read that fast. I don't think that, I do think that it sets an unrealistic expectation for the average person, but I don't think that it's something that content creators do on purpose, if that makes sense. I don't know. Next one, this is a good one. Promoting a book by its trope is misleading and waters down what it means to give a book review. Okay, this is hard for me because I agree and disagree at the same time. The first thing I'll say is that, like, if you are making bookish content on, you know, Instagram or TikTok, those are short form video platforms, aka you've got to be able to talk about a book as fast as you can in like the little time that you have, and the quickest way to do that is it's tropes. That's just the facts of the matter. So I don't think that it's necessarily wrong to talk about a book and name its tropes and stuff like that. Now, as far as authors and publishing houses and all of that with their marketing, promoting a book by its tropes, I can't stand that. Like that, I don't know. I feel like that is watering down. Like, it feels like a lot of writers nowadays are writing books just trying to include as many tropes as they can, hoping that it sells well. And that, I think, is a bit much. But I don't necessarily think that talking about tropes waters down what it means to give a review. I don't necessarily include tropes unless I'm talking about like a romance, a really standard issue kind of like cheesy romance. Then yeah, I might include that, like, oh, it's a one bed trope or a friends to lovers kind of thing. But for the most part, I don't tend to include tropes in my own reviews, but it is what it is. This next one is juicy. Aatar is trash and has ruined the fantasy romance genre. If you don't know what Aatar is, that is Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This was an opinion that I saw everywhere. This, I mean, just not just this opinion, but also just about Sarah J. Maas and her books in general. Like, this was everywhere. I couldn't not include this. Here's what I'm gonna say. I have read all of Aatar. I have read Crescent City. I did not read Throne of Glass. I probably never will. But I read Aatar and Crescent City, and I enjoyed both of them. Do I think that Aatar is like the pinnacle of literature and all of that? No, I don't. But I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed the experience of reading it with friends. I thought that the story was entertaining enough. It's not unproblematic, but you know, what is these days? I think that something that has been lost in all of this is this idea that like everything is subjective. You may not like something that somebody else loves, and that is okay. Like, reading is subjective, art is subjective, simple as that. I think that just because you don't like something that somebody else likes doesn't mean you need to call it trash. Like, it's just that simple. I will agree that it is annoying when every other fantasy romance is constantly compared to Aatar and now Fourth Wing. That is definitely annoying, but I don't think that one book or one book series can ruin an entire genre. I think that that is just too much. And I think that this happens whenever something becomes really popular. There's gonna be a lot of people who don't like it simply because it's popular, or some people just don't like it. It's not their vibe, and that's okay. But calling it trash, I can't get down with that. There are plenty of books and series that I do not like, that I just will probably never read, or even if I did, I wouldn't like them. But you're never gonna hear me call them trash. You're never gonna hear me talk crap about the people that read them. I think that, like I said, I think the art of like understanding that things are subjective has gotten lost. TikTok or book talk is ruining literature / reading. This is a sentiment that was all over my For You page not too long ago, which was basically just other people saying like, my For You page is filled with these terrible romances or these terrible fantasy romances. And here's what I have to say. Your online experience is what you make it. Your For You page is what you make it. Your on YouTube, on Instagram, it is what you make it. So for a perfect example, I am not a big dark romance reader. I'm just not. It's not my thing. So if I'm on TikTok and I am scrolling away and a creator comes on talking about a dark romance, I swipe away. I don't like it. I don't comment. I don't even do that whole like not interested thing, because that's still in some ways interacting with it. I don't want to see that on my For You page. And so I don't normally. Once in a while it gets in there. And that is how you curate your own online experience. If you're seeing a bunch of books that you don't like, it's because regardless of whether you're reacting or not reacting, but interacting is what I'm trying to say. Regardless of whether you are interacting with that content negatively or positively, you're still interacting with it. And the algorithm is like, oh, they want to see more of this, even when you probably don't. But it is what it is. As far as it ruining, you know, literature and all of that, it's just crap. It's just crap. That's how I feel about that. This is a good one. Romance without open door spice is boring. No, it's not. I just disagree. I'm gonna get into this a little bit more when I talk about my own opinions, my own bookish opinions at the end of the video. But yeah, no, I just disagree right off the bat. Like I said, I'll get into that more. Physical books are better than reading on a phone or on a tablet. You can pry my Kindle from my cold, dead hands, okay? Here's the thing. One is not better than the other. It's whatever is best for you. I love my Kindle. My Kindle is my baby. I take it everywhere with me. Wherever I go, it goes with me. My Kindle is life. I love a good physical book. Like, look at my shelves. Look, you can't see, but behind you, I have a bunch of books. I have books back there. This is a whole bookshelf. I love me a good physical book, but there is nothing compared to being able to lay in bed at night and read this and not it be on my phone. Like, I love my Kindle, but I stand by, it's not one over the other. It's whatever works best for the reader, whatever works best for you. So if you prefer a physical book, read a physical book. If you prefer a Kindle, read a Kindle. If you prefer an audiobook, listen to an audiobook. It's subjective, you know? It's whatever works for you. Simple as that. Nonfiction is superior to fiction. No. Just no. Hard disagree. This was another super prevalent opinion that I saw, which was people being like, oh, this one's so much better than this one. No genre is superior to any genre. It's whatever you like. It's whatever the reader likes. I like all types of books. I'm not big into horror here and there, but I like crime mystery. I like fiction. I love nonfiction. I like biographies. I like true crime books. I like mystery books. I like romance. I like fantasy. I like fantasy romance. I like it all. And I don't think any is better than the other. I like literature, just regular fiction. I like it all. And nothing is better than the other. It's all just whatever you're in the mood for or whatever you want to read in that moment. I know that there are people who only read romance or who only read fantasy or who only read horror or mystery, all of that. And that's fine. But it doesn't make those genres better or superior to any other genre. It's just, that's not how that works. Trigger warnings in books are stupid. I disagree to an extent. At the end of the day, if we have really big triggers, it is our job to look into the media that we're consuming and make sure that our specific trigger is not in that media. It's just that simple, whether it's a TV show, a book, a movie, whatever the case may be. However, I don't think it hurts anybody for a book that has things within it that might be or are triggering to other people. It doesn't hurt anybody to have a list of those trigger warnings at the beginning of the book. I know that some people argue like, oh, it spoils the plot, blah, blah, blah. Well, then if that's the case, then do like they do with fan fiction. Like if you're reading on Archive of Our Own, a lot of the times at the top it'll say, hey, if you want trigger warnings, go to the notes at the end of the page and you can click a button and it takes you right there. Same thing with a book. Same thing with the Kindle. On a Kindle, it can say, hey, if you want the trigger warnings, click here on the Kindle. If you want the trigger warnings, go to this page. Go and you can go to that page. That there's, you know, ways around it if you're worried that it's going to ruin the plot for people who don't want trigger warnings. But in general, I don't understand it. It's not stupid, that's for sure. I think that there's nothing wrong with including trigger warnings in books that contain material that might be extremely triggering. So that's my opinion. This is a more lighthearted one. Enemies to lovers is better than friends to lovers. It just straight up depends on the story. I mean, again, this is back to the tropes thing, but like I love a good enemies to lovers story if it's done well, if there's an actual reason for them to be enemies and not just two people who dislike each other. That being said, I love friends to lovers especially when it's like childhood friends all the way up. Oh, I love it. I love both. I don't think anyone's better than the other, so there you go. People should separate the author from their work. It doesn't matter about the author's opinions in real life. I disagree. I disagree. Now, that being said, if you are somebody who can separate the two, I do not judge you, but I cannot. I find it very difficult to separate the art from the artist. It doesn't matter. If I love a song and I find out the singer is a really terrible person who has really terrible beliefs or did something really terrible, I really can't listen to it anymore. Like, it's just sort of that simple. You know, and that's my opinion. Again, I don't judge anybody who can separate the art from the artist. That's your prerogative, whatever. But for me personally, I can't, and I don't think you should have to. You know what I'm saying? I think that, again, that's like a personal preference sort of thing. This one's just funny. Rainbow or color coordinated bookshelves are ugly. This was literally such a prevalent one when I was looking for random, you know, unpopular bookish opinions, and I don't know why. It's just so funny to me. Listen, it's not my style. Like, my bookshelves are chaotic. I mean, there's some rhyme or reason to it, but they're mostly chaotic. And I definitely am never gonna have, I'm not a white bookshelf kind of person anyway, but I'm never gonna have them in rainbow order. That being said, it's not ugly, and it's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't want it, then don't put it in your home. Or if you don't want to look at it, don't watch content creators with it in their background. Like, it's just such a weird thing. It's such a weird opinion that I saw that so many people had. I don't know, it's just strange to me. BookTok/BookTube overhypes books all the time. I agree. I agree, but I don't think it's done on purpose. Listen, when a book gets popular and everybody's making content about it, that's kind of like a snowball effect. So if we'll take Fourth Wing, for example. I didn't read Fourth Wing for so long because I felt like it might have been overhyped. It took like 2 of my good friends being like, no, read this, you'll enjoy it, and I did. That being said, what happens is this sort of snowball effect, right? So somebody makes a video about a book that is, you know, new, or it's just coming out and it's kind of popular, and then that video blows up. So then other content creators go, oh, well, I'm gonna make a video about that book too. Like, there you go. And then it kind of grows and grows and grows from there. But it also has to do with, a lot of the times, those people just generally enjoy the books, and so they're gonna talk about them. You know, Fourth Wing was a great book, and I'm glad that I read it, and I can't wait for the next one to come out. That being said, I didn't for so long because I was so worried that it was overhyped, because I had been burned before by my For You page showing me the same book over and over again, and then me going and reading it and being like, why? This is not that great. I didn't enjoy this that much. But again, it is subjective, so maybe I thought Fourth Wing was great, and somebody else might be like, no, it was overhyped. So I don't know. I don't know where I land with this one. I agree to an extent, I guess we'll say, yeah. Authors who release multiple special editions of books are just doing it for a money grab and being greedy. I disagree with the greedy part, but like, yeah, that's sort of the point of like releasing special editions, to make money. Authors want to make money too, you know? You don't have to buy every special edition of a book. You don't. Nobody's forcing you to. It's just that simple. It's kind of like the variants with albums and singers and all of that. Like, they put out different variants of their albums, or different, you know, back in my day we had CDs, and so they would put out like a special edition. It would have a different cover. You don't have to buy every single one. I don't know. I don't think it's greedy at all. I just don't. There you go. That's my opinion. I disagree. If a person only reads fantasy romance and not regular fantasy, then they don't like fantasy. Disagree. It also just doesn't make sense. If a person didn't like fantasy, they would just read regular romance and not fantasy romance. Obviously. It was such a weird one that I saw like multiple times throughout my like search process. Listen, I have not read a lot of like regular fantasy without some kind of a romance plot, you know, whatever. But I like fantasy. I like it. I just also like for there to be a love story. I think this is a weird take, ultimately. And the last one, people hate too much on books they don't like. I completely agree with this wholeheartedly. This sort of goes back to the Aatar one just a little bit ago. I find that the loudest voices are the voices of people who don't like a thing. And that's not just books, that's like all across. My thing is if you don't like it, just don't like it. But to continuously bash something is just so wild. But there are a lot of content creators on here on YouTube or on TikTok or BookTube that sort of make it their niche of like, this is a terrible book and I'm gonna show you all the better books. And it's like, I don't know, I don't agree with it. I think that people that don't like certain books or certain series are very loud with that dislike and that hate. And I just don't like it. I'm not that kind of person. I mean, if I don't like a book, I don't like a book. And you're not gonna hear me rant about it. I'm not gonna give it that much energy, but there are so many people on both TikTok and YouTube that dislike Aatar or Fourth Wing. But yeah, I agree with this. People hate on things way too hard. Okay, that was all of the opinions that I could find. Well, I mean, I found a lot more, but that was it boiled down. And my reactions to those opinions, or my opinions on those opinions. How many times do you think that I could say opinions in this video? Anyway, now I'm gonna give you my own unpopular opinions or hot takes. And then again, you guys can comment down below what you think of my personal opinions. My first one, I think that spice ratings are pointless and I can't stand them. Honestly, this is a hill that I'm eventually going to die on. It really, really is. I don't know. I don't like spice ratings. Number one, they are too subjective. What about the spice are you rating? Is it the quality? Is it the quantity? Is it how graphic the spice or smut in the book is? Is it the, just what about it, or is it how realistic it is? Just what about it are you rating? The amount of times that I have seen somebody rate a book with like 4 chili peppers and it has 1 spice scene and it's not even all that graphic, I'm like, I don't understand. I just don't understand. I think that there's a better way when talking about books that have spice or smut, whatever you want to call it, whatever. I think that there's a better way that we can talk about it, a better way we can describe it. Does it have open door or closed door? Is it graphic, or do they use, you know, lighter terms? How many scenes? How often? Is it gratuitous? Do you feel like there's not enough? You know what I'm saying? Like little things like that, I think, are a better way to describe what the spice or smut in a book is than just an overall spice rating. Unless, of course, somebody gives you how they rate their spice. You know what I'm saying? Like Elise Myers, when she talks about books, she gives a whole breakdown of her ratings and how she rates things, which I think if you're gonna give like a whole breakdown on how you will rate the spice and then give a spice rating, that's fine. But to just be like, oh, I read this book, 5 stars, 4 chili peppers. I read this book, like, what does that mean? I don't know. This is a hill that I'm gonna die on. I know so many people might disagree with me, but I just can't stand it. Don't like it. I love third act breakups. I don't understand why so many people, when talking about romance novels or when looking for romance novels, it's always like, only if there's no third act breakup. Well, I love that. I think the reason that I like it is because it gives like a full picture of what the two people's relationship looks like. If that makes sense, you get to see them start, you get to see them get together, then you get to see them break up and what they're like when they break up, and then what they're like when they get back together. I don't know. I love a good third act breakup. I also prefer more of a slow burn. Like I don't like insta love, so I think the reason I like a third act breakup is because it just inserts some drama. Of course, it has to make sense. Like I don't like random pointless breakups over like a miscommunication, but I like third act breakups. And I feel like whenever I say that, people are like, why? Don't you want them to be happy? I'm like, yeah, eventually we'll get there. But let them break up and then get back together. I don't know. It's just how it is. Okay, so earlier, one of the opinions that I read was something along the lines of romance novels without open door spice is boring. And I told you guys that I would go more in depth on my opinion on that. And that's where this one comes in. Actually, the next 2 opinions that I have sort of coincide. So the first one is, I think that sometimes unnecessary spice ruins a book. The amount of times that I have picked up a book that had a really good blurb on the back, the premise of the book is great, but then it is just spice scene after spice scene after spice scene, and there's very little plot. I just think that sometimes gratuitous smut or spice in a book is just, it just ruins a book that could have had a good plot. I mean, this has happened so many times to me while reading, where I'm just like, I can't. Well, like, why are they doing this again? Can we get to the part where they talk, where they communicate, where something else happens? And yeah, I feel like sometimes it's taking away from the plot, or it's slowing the book down, or it's not making sense to the story, if that makes sense. Like if I wanted to read erotica, that's what I would do. I would go read erotica, but I'm trying to read a book where there's got to be some sort of plot. You know what I'm saying? That's just, you know, there you go. There's my opinion on that. But that leads me to this next one, which I'm trying to figure out a way to word this. If you are giving a book a lower rating because it does not have any open door spice, then it might just be time to admit that you're just looking for porn. And honestly, that's okay. There is erotica. Go read erotica. But I have seen so many people review books or give ratings and be like, oh, there's no spice in this, so I'm giving it a 1 star. That blows my mind. Like, if you can't read a book without spice, then number 1, don't read it, but also don't rate it lower just because there is no spice in it. It's so frustrating when you're looking, it's not frustrating, but it is a little bit annoying when you're like watching a book review, and I can't imagine what it's like for content. I don't experience this obviously, but I've seen content creators talking about how they'll rate a book and talk about it, and all the comments are, is there spice? Is there spice in this? What's the spice rating? Why? Just read the book. If you are looking specifically for spice, go read erotica. There's nothing wrong with that. Erotica is great and healthy and all of that. But this like pervasive sort of idea that if a romance book doesn't have enough spice in it, then it's not good. I can't get with that. It's just it's so frustrating. This is another hill that I'm probably very willing to die on. Okay, this mostly goes for romance, but not every book needs an epilogue where the two main characters get married and have babies and everything is wrapped up with a nice little bow. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. Marriage and babies are not a finish line, number one. They should never be. Not in real life, not in a story. They just shouldn't be. They are just another life experience. And a lot of the times authors will write these beautiful stories, wonderful things, and then there'll be this epilogue where it's like rapid fire. Oh, he proposed, we got married, we had a baby, we had another baby. And it's like, that's not the ending of a story. It's just not. It's the beginning of a new story. Because let me tell you, you don't know your partner until you have children with your partner. And I feel like if you want to write that, sure, but write another book. Show the trials and tribulations of them going through parenthood together. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't stand when I'm reading a book and it's good and then I get to the epilogue, I'm like, oh, really? Just, if you're gonna have them get married, just include it in the story. There doesn't need to be this like epilogue of a nice little neat bow. I don't know. This probably is my most unpopular opinion. Next one, unplanned pregnancy is the worst trope ever. Don't care what anybody says. Worst trope ever. And I know somebody's gonna be like, oh, non-con's a terrible trope. I don't think that's a trope. That shouldn't be considered a trope. That should just be considered something that shouldn't be done. Pregnancy, unplanned pregnancy is a terrible trope. I have never once read a story, a book, a fan fiction, anything where it is done well. You can almost always see it coming. And then what it usually ends up happening is they get together, but then it's like, are they only together because she's pregnant? Because usually that's exactly how it happens. They're not actually together, and then she has an unplanned pregnancy, or they are together, but they're having issues, and then she has an unplanned pregnancy, which fixes everything. That's not how life works. And I understand that reading is supposed to be for escape, but for me personally, that's not an escape. I don't like it. Worst trope ever. Can't stand it. And then my last unpopular opinion is gonna be that beautiful writing, beautiful flowery writing cannot make up for a lack of plot, a lack of character development, and it just doesn't. It really doesn't. I have seen so many people recommend books that they're like, oh, the prose are beautiful, and then I go to read it and I'm like, yeah, the writers got away with words, but there's nothing happening in this story. And I have a specific book in mind, which is When the Moon Hatched. Great writing, wonderful writing. Nothing happened in that book. I got 85% through and then DNF'd it. But seriously, like, you can write as pretty as you want, but if the story isn't there, that beautiful flowery writing is not going to save it. That's just the truth. That's how I feel. But yeah. Okay, so that was me reacting to some popular, unpopular opinions and then giving you a bunch of my own unpopular opinions. If you liked this video, if you want to see more from me, then you know what to do. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video with some of your bookish friends who have a lot of opinions, whether they're good or bad. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.